Good afternoon and welcome to Seniors Count. I'm your host, Greg Jocelyn. On our show, we believe that you are the foundation on which Boston was built. So our goal is to connect you to resources, benefits, and information to enhance your life. Thanks for joining us. My guest today is Andrea Lovett. She's a storyteller and co-founder of Mass Mouth Incorporated, a nonprofit organization with an investment towards storytelling. As they put it, we're interested in connecting people to their stories to connect people through their stories. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
So because we're talking about storytelling today, I thought it was fitting for you to share a 5-minute story that's a signature of Mass Mouth. So you told me before we started about the turkey story. So could you share with our viewers?
I would love to tell you the turkey story. The turkey story is a true story. In my family, we always had stories that happened around the table. This is a story that happened a little bit before we gathered around the table. And I should tell you before we start that growing up, my parents were very different. My father was a man that liked everything in the box and everything had a place. And my mother was a person that chaos danced around her like a party dress. Things always happened around my mother. And the one thing they had in common was that they loved people and they loved the holidays, and they would invite lots and lots of people over for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Well, this one Thanksgiving, my mother had invited 27 people for Thanksgiving dinner, and I didn't even know half of them. I was sitting across from the mailman and my mother's hairdresser. Who knew? And she hadn't purchased her turkey, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. You see, she was very generous with her heart, but a bit frugal with her purse. So she was waiting for a good buy. And I was sitting across from her, and she was reading the paper early in the morning, and then her eyes sort of glazed over, and she looked, and she said, "That's it! Big Bird's cheap! Get in the car! The butcher block in the North End in Boston just opened." So we went in to Boston in the North End, and we drove to the parking lot of this new store called the Butcher Block. And there was a sea of cars. We couldn't find a place to park anywhere. And there was a line snaking out the door and around the corner, but my mother was not to be assuaged. She was determined we were going to get this bird. So we parked a little bit up the hill, and we walked down, and we took our place in line. And she was looking over shoulders and through elbows, looking for that bin with the Big Bird's cheap. And I knew she found it because her eyes fixated on the back. And when the crowd cleared, she made a beeline over for this bin. And she looked at me and she said, "Hold my waist, I'm going in." I said, "What?" "Hold my waist, I'm going in." My mother was going turkey diving. Now, my mother was not a large woman. And I held her waist, and it was not long before she was in the bin. She was searching for a really big bird. And then she called over her shoulder, "Pull me up, I've got one." I said, "What?" "Pull me up, I have one." Attached to her hand was the largest bird I'd ever seen. It was the size of a small cow. It took 2 of us to bring it over to the conveyor belt and plop it on. And there was a man standing there with a scully cap and a long white coat with smudges all over it, and a snub-nosed cigar. And he looked at that bird coming up, and he said, "That's a big bird, lady, big bird." And he started slapping the bird like this. There's cigar ash going all over my mother's Thanksgiving bird. And she gave him a cold stare. And she was not the type of woman that liked cigar ash seasoning on her Thanksgiving bird. He said, "You know what I'm going to do for you? I'm going to double bag it." He put the bird in the bag, handed my mother a handle and myself a handle, and we started to make our way up the street to the car. And we're talking back and forth, and all of a sudden something shifted in the bag, and we looked at each other, we caught each other's eye, and the bag burst open, and the turkey started to roll down the sidewalk, neck over tail, neck over tail, neck over tail, where it sort of teetered on the curb and sloughed over. My mother's face was as white as a ghost, if you could imagine. And she ran down to the curb, and she picked it up very carefully like this, and she turned it this way, and she turned it that way. And she said to me, "It's still good, let's get it in the car." So we went and we put it in the back seat of the car. In our house, we had a saying, and about halfway home, she looked at me and she said, "Now don't tell your father." We didn't tell my father much because he was a very nervous man. He might get overexcited that his bird ran down the sidewalk and landed in the gutter. So we brought the bird home, and we were exhausted. We put it on the kitchen table, and we went out and sat in the living room. When we heard this, boom, and we ran out in time to catch the dog and cat arguing over what was left of the turkey leg. My mother picked up the turkey, shooed them away, put it in the sink, washed it off, took a needle and thread, I don't lie, she did this, she reattached the bird to the leg. And then the next morning she got up really early because it was a big bird. And she opened the oven door, put the bird in, and about 10 o'clock, the fire alarm started to go out. Wah, wah, wah. My father, that was the only thing he never got excited about because it happened every day. You see, my mother was that kind of cook. "Everything all right in there, Louise? Everything's fine." But it wasn't. When she opened the oven door, there was soot and grease covering the turkey. She took it out of the oven, put it in the sink, and washed it off. But I should tell you, my mother was a genius in the kitchen. She reached up and got the food coloring, yellow and orange she mixed, and then she got a paintbrush from my praying watercolor box, and she painted the entire bird with the food coloring and put it back into the oven. Several hours later, you look at me like this can't be true. Absolutely true, can't make this up. Several hours later, the turkey came out, and I have to tell you, it was a beautiful golden brown. It's just like they have on TV or in the magazines. And she gave it to my father, who served it up. And afterwards, he leaned back and said, "Geez, Louise, that was the best bird I ever had. Did you do anything different?" My mother looked at me, and I looked at her, and she gave me a look like, "Don't tell your father." Of course, we wouldn't, because he'd only get upset. He did not need to know that his turkey was tenderized by rolling it down the hill, pulling out dirt, grits, and sand, having the dog and cat argue over it, and then painting it later on after the grease. But if you want to know the best recipe for a turkey dinner, you might want to try that one.
That's wonderful. So completely true story.
It's true.
No fiction.
No fiction in that, no.
And that's the signature of Mass Mouth, is that it's all true stories.
They're all true stories. We like to say you can embellish. They should be 98% true, and you can embellish a little bit, but they should be 98% true.
Has anyone ever made up a story and claimed it's true?
Actually, we did have that.
Oh, okay.
And you know why it's not done and why it shouldn't be done is because when you're invited to tell and listen to a true story, you go on a journey with that teller. And at the end, if you find out that that wasn't true, you feel like you've been duped or lied to. Yeah, you feel like you've been robbed. And actually, the person that did do this came in with that intention, and he won. And afterwards, the newspapers wanted to interview him, and he told them that what he had done. And they actually interviewed the second place winner, and he got a very small spot. And it was a controversy, and we learned early on that that's probably a rule that we have to add in there. They must be true, and so they are. Right. It is in the rules, yeah.
I mean, but you don't have to make up a story to have a good story.
You absolutely don't. Stories come from conversations. Stories come from, I mean, you just told the story that I told you the story outside. Stories come from conversations. And everybody, if you have a life, we like to say, if you have a life, you have a story. difference with poetry slams and story slams is that poetry, you can write your own poems, and some people are poets and some are not, but everybody has a story because you have lived a life.
So can you tell me a little bit about the structure of a story slam and just describe what an evening is like at Massmouth?
Oh, well, you experienced one. That's where we met, and they are so fun. It's a little bit of electricity in the air.
Electricity.
Because no one knows whose name's going to be pulled. The theme goes up a week or two or a month or two before, and it's 5-minute stories on a theme, and they are judged. There's a panel of 5 to 3 judges, and sometimes there's an audience choice. And it's exciting because you're sharing with the audience a life experience that you have, and people not only listen to that story, they experience the story. And we know that to be true because there was an experiment that was set up with an MRI, and they had, the doctor had a storyteller and a listener, and when the storyteller told the story, the listener's brain lit up in exactly the same places as the storyteller, which meant they weren't just listening, they were experiencing the story. We like to say where can you jump from a plane, give birth to quadruplets, and go deep sea diving, all from the safety of your chair.
Right. I mean, and like just even you telling the story, I felt transported to all of the locations you were talking about. I could even smell the turkey and the burning, and it kind of feels like that. And you're transported, and you're not. You know, you think about going to see a play where maybe something's acted out, but there's more power, I think, to imagining a story rather than having to see it in a movie or a play.
They say the book is always better than the movie. I think that the reason that is because you're using your own imagination. Even though the author sets up the location and will give you details, you are imagining that place and that time, and you put your own spin on it. And then the movie, you're looking at someone else's imagination, bringing it to life.
Right, so we're wired for stories.
We are wired for stories, it's true.
So it's a good reason to go to a Massmouth event.
Absolutely, everyone should. We have people from teenage years, 18, all the way to 85. And we've even had a 89-year-old get up and tell. And a powerful story. It was a World War II story, actually, and it was as if we were on the battlefield with him. So
that's incredible.
It is.
And so when everyone's finished telling the stories, how does the judging process work? I mean, how do you grade a story?
I'll tell you. And we don't have judges that, you know, they're experienced people. If you have listened to a story, then you can be a judge. Because
I see, right.
You know when you hear a good story. Everyone knows when they hear a good story. But what we judged on is the story arc. Does it have a point to it? Does it have a strong beginning, middle, and end? Were you engaging the audience? Do you know why you're telling a story? Have you ever heard somebody and you're like, why are they telling this story? This has no point. I don't understand.
A tangential story.
Exactly. Right. You should know why you're telling the story. It should be self-evident. When I teach workshops, I always say, you know, who, what, where, when, but the why should be self-evident in the story. We should know why you're telling that story.
Right, right. So essentially, you know, you don't have to be a professional to be a judge.
No. You absolutely do not. You just have to know that what's a good story. Or you know, everybody has a different opinion. And also closeness, connection to the theme. You know, if you, the story slam that we did was Second Chances.
Second Chances.
So you don't want to come in and tell a story about the day you, first time you're on a bike. You know, you want to make sure you connect with the theme. Although the themes are usually 1 or 2 words so that they can be pulled and interpreted in a way that connects with the themes. For instance, when we do Arrows of Eros, that was the love one, or Stupid Cupid, you know.
Stupid Cupid, I like that. That's great.
So you can pull it any different way, or Bitter bitter can be bittersweet.
Bittersweet,
Bitter can be a romance. Bitter can be so many different things to so many people. It's just a way you interpret bitter, as long as it connects with the theme.
And so you also do, in addition to the slams, you do a lot of workshops. You call it the kick butt storytelling.
I do. That's what it's become known as way back when. How to tell a 5-minute kick butt story.
Right.
And what I will do, everyone can tell a story, but can you tell it well so that other people will listen to you? I mean, there are elements that you want to make sure you include.
And so besides the arc and the basic structure of a story, I mean, what are there any secrets about like stories that really resonate with us?
I think so. A lot similes and metaphors. If you can connect your 5 senses to the content of your story, I mean, I could tell you, I came in and I went to Dunkin' Donuts and I got they were giving away donuts. You say, oh, okay. Yeah. They were giving away donuts the size of dinner plates. There was a line out the. It changes it up.
Exactly.
So you want to have some place that you're in. You want to make sure we don't want to be floating out in space. We're looking for those threads to connect with the story. Where do we connect with that story? Like the donuts, okay, we know this, and they were like that, so we can connect there. We have a reference point. People are always looking for that reference point so that they can connect.
Right.
So I think that's important. I also think you need to have a terrific killer kick-ass first line, because you have just a minute to connect, not even a minute to connect with your audience. They'll give you maybe a second chance if the second line is a killer, but you need to have a first line. What was the first line we were just talking about? Tell us that first line.
So we were talking about my great-grandfather.
Oh, don't even say that. Just tell us what that first line is.
What was the first line? It was
the black socks.
The black sock. He met his death with a black sock.
What a great first line. That's a great first line. And I would want to hear, how can black socks kill you?
Yeah. So in that story, my great-grandfather, it was the ink in his black sock that got infected to a wound. So before penicillin.
That's right. That's a terrific story. I know that could be worked up.
Well, maybe
with that
start
first
working
line.
on it. But that's a good point, though, because you can think about, you can just start with one line and you can go anywhere. I mean, and that's
exactly.
It demystifies it in a way. If someone says, "Oh, I don't have a story," it's like, well, you pick a theme, pick a first line.
And I always say, we don't memorize. None of us memorize our stories.
Okay, so that's interesting.
It is interesting. It is raw. Even a storyteller like myself will not memorize. You tell it so many times, you may internalize it, but you live this experience. It will come out. If I told that story 5 minutes from now, it would be slightly different.
Sure.
I never memorize. In fact, when you're watching somebody telling a story and listening, and they have, especially a writer, they have beautiful lines that they hate to kill, and they're searching. They get to this part, and they're like, and you think to yourself, they're searching for a line. they should throw that out. We say, kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings.
Because, and be open to just letting the story flow, so that it's more natural.
Right, and so in order to kind of experience this, so there's one, we were talking about the slams itself and the workshops. In the Boston area, is there anything coming up that we should keep in mind as people?
There's lists.
We have a whole...
Storytelling, when Norma and I began, we'd come off the board of the New England Lanes, the League for the Advancement of New England Storytelling, and that group actually was founded here in Boston, but it's a regional group, so now it's traveling around all over the region of New England. Okay. There was nothing in Boston, and there were places like Brother Blue in Cambridge had storytelling going, and there were pockets, but nothing really connecting. And people thought, well, storytelling is for children in libraries. And we said, oh, not so, not so.
Storytelling is for adults.
Storytelling is for everybody. We also have the Stories Live, which is the high school program. But what we did was we started surprising people unexpected places, which was okay. It was a surprise. But Nora went to New York, to the bitter end where the Moth is, this little club, and she came back, she said, there are 300 people waiting to hear other people that they don't even know who's telling. And she said, we have to do this. And I said, yeah. So we went, we took a hit for the team, and we went for all the bars around the Boston Common. And to their credit, no one turned us down when we presented them with this idea. But we stopped at when it was Kennedy's, which is no longer there. And the man that owned it, he said, do you mean that if I have you come here and this starts and takes off, Kennedy's will be known for storytelling? I said, yes, yeah. And it was. Yeah. And still is to this day, even though it's no longer there. That was our foundation. And we sold out the first...
I can imagine.
Who knew?
Yeah, what a surprise.
All these adults came, and I forget what the first theme was, but we called everyone we knew when we were a nervous wreck, but it's been sold out everywhere since, and many, many other venues have popped up. Nora and I always had said, a rising tide floats many boats, so the boats are now floating.
Well, that's good. It's good to hear that. And so you do a lot of slams at Doyle's.
Doyle's, well, I'm going to be doing a spin-off with Robin Maxfield, who has been the host for Mass Mouth at Doyle's, and is going to have a little bit different format. Okay. So those will be coming up, and those are going to be the first Sunday of every month. And people are used to Doyle's. Robin is the person in the neighborhood, and when she first started, I think half the room was filled with her friends, and there were 125 people there, so Robin's quite popular.
So there's a long list, and so interested individuals can go to the Mass Mouth website.
Absolutely.
To take a look at
That's
the
what
list.
I would do. Mass Mouth has Club Passim there on the first Monday and the third Monday. Oh no, the first one is Trident Booksellers, and the second one is the third Monday, which is Club Passim.
That's great.
And Club Passim, as you know, is an old venue that's been around with Joan Baez and
that's right.
Lots of folk singers got their start there. So it's a real sacred place to tell a story.
So lots of opportunities for storytelling and sharing, and not forgetting that stories come out of conversation. So we hope people keep telling them.
Yes, well, I'm going to tell you some stories when we leave here.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and we will be glad to have you back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching Seniors Count. This is brought to you by the Mayor, Martin J. Walsh, and our Commissioner, Emily Shea. Please give us a call at 617-635-4366. You can also call the Mayor's 24-hour hotline, 617-635-4500. You can also email us or find us on Facebook. We hope you have a great afternoon.
And clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I think to myself,